Hello and bonjour, I am Sarah Bokhari with Power Dilemmas here at TAG TV. It has been some time, folks, that the federal government paid Omar Khadr a settlement of $10.5 million to resolve his civil suit over allegations of mistreatment and breaches of his charter rights. According to an Angus Reid Institute survey, many Canadians seem unhappy about the payment, but also seem to believe that Khadr has not been treated fairly. The Liberals and Conservatives, meanwhile, have staked out diametrically opposed positions. The Conservatives object to the notion of paying a convicted terrorist, a reference to the 2010 plea deal that Khadr is appealing, and say they would have fought his lawsuit in court. Was Omar Khadr a convicted terrorist? Why was $10.5 million doled out to Omar Khadr from the pockets of citizens? To talk about this and more, we have in our studios today very well-informed guests, Mr. Ali Naqvi, who is a political analyst, and we also have Benjamin Ditcher, who is a candidate of record with the Conservative government. So welcome to my show.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us.
So first to you, Mr. Naqvi, do you think that Omar Khadr was a convicted terrorist or an ill-informed child?
So, Sarah, thank you for inviting me. This is a very sensitive topic. Omar was a minor when he went into the famous firefight in Afghanistan. Omar was a minor when he was arrested, and Omar was a minor when he was taken to Gitmo. And Omar was a minor when Canadian intelligence authorities interviewed Omar Khadr in the most heinous, inhuman prisons of, I would say, all times, the Gitmo Bay. And so to answer your question, the fact remains that he was a minor. The fact remains that he was under 18. And a child is a child under the international law, under Canadian law, as well as under American law. However, we should not forget that according to the United Nations, Khadr was the first person since World War II to be prosecuted in a military commission for war crimes committed while still a minor. His conviction and sentence was denounced by almost all the civil rights groups and the United Nations Special Representative for Children in Armed Conflict. Now, we have to backtrack a little and tell me if I'm going too long. We have to see how these facts unfolded. Why Omar was taken by his parents in an early age to Pakistan and Afghanistan. Who sent Canadian soldiers in harm's way in a foreign land, in a foreign dispute where we lost a large number of Canadian brothers and sisters in Afghanistan. We have to see under which government these human rights, the human rights of Omar Khadr and many others were violated, and we have to see who is today paying that 10.5 million compensation to Omar Khadr. So this is how it unfolds very clearly. Liberals, liberals, liberals. So in your introduction, a very smart, intelligent introduction, you mentioned the conservatives' point of view and the liberal point of view. There's another point of view, and that point of view is the people of Canada, which has been raised by the New Democratic Party of Canada till September 11, 2001. And that point of view has been what happened in the United States is the worst incident that could have happened. However, Canadians should have not been made a part of it. And because that point of view, we were able to stop the government of Jean Chrétien, the Liberal Prime Minister at the time, from sending our Canadian troops to Iraq. That was a victory of the people of Canada. That fight was led by the NDP. Unfortunately, when it comes to the matters of the money and not mind, the question is framed whether it's conservative or liberal. And when we talk about conservatism or liberalism, my humble assertion is that there is no difference in today's Canada. So Omar Khadr, as a matter of fact, was a child, and he was convicted as a child under this special military regime of law in the United States.
So Benjamin, what do you think? Omar Khadr was a convicted terrorist or an ill-informed child?
I'm going to try to respond without the appeal to authority fallacy. I think the first thing to acknowledge is to say that Guantanamo is the most heinous prison I don't remember how you phrased it exactly, but that it's completely egregious, is completely disingenuous. There's a series of events that have happened throughout the world, starting back to the Holocaust, concentration camps. You see some of the travesties that happened in Rwanda and other parts of the world, Cambodia. Guantanamo Bay is not nearly on the same level as this, so let's not try to conflate these two things. On to Omar Khadr. He was 1 week away from his 16th birthday. Under the Geneva Convention, a child soldier is 14 years of age or younger. So he was not a child soldier. And insinuating that he was just a child removes his agency, which means at the age of 16 years old, he was unable to think for himself. I'm sure quite a number of these people who are watching today have 16-year-old children and are aware that they have minds of their own, and they have no problem being, disrespectful or, going against the wishes of their parents. So I'm sorry, that is not a valid excuse. He was convicted after pleading guilty to murder in the United States. So he's a terrorist. Simple.
So
that was a plea bargain. That was a plea bargain that he entered into, and then he appealed that conviction, and he clearly said that he was made to understand that as a result of that plea bargain, he would be removed to his country of citizenship, Canada. And we should not forget, this Omar Khadr, the gentleman by the name of Omar Khadr, is not a citizen of any other country but Canada. He is not an Afghani. He is not a Pakistani. And going back to the heinous conditions in Gitmo Bay, I said one of the most heinous places. So trying to frame religious connotations on a matter of fact that he was under international law a minor, which is under 18 years of age, whether or not he was smart enough to make his own decisions, the Supreme Court of Canada did not think so. Supreme Court of Canada was very clear. The decision that allowed this Liberal government to pay him $10.5 million is based on the Supreme Court of Canada's decision. And the suit was very, very focused. The suit was not about whether or not he was a convicted criminal. The suit was about the Canadians, us, interrogated him in Gitmo and violated his Charter of Rights and Freedom under our charter. And that's why the Supreme Court decided that his charter rights, as you mentioned, were violated.
Why was he sent to Guantanamo Bay? You want to take that? Why was he sent to Guantanamo?
Well, I would like
the Americans took him.
I would like to respond to the various assertions as best as I can. The fact that he was convicted under a plea bargain, he's still convicted. And
in America, not in Canada.
Okay, so when I go to South America and I commit a crime and I go to court and I'm charged, does their charges hold no weight? I have to be excommunicated back to Canada and charged here? No. When I lived in South America, I know that I'm not protected under Canadian law. I am in that country, and if I commit a crime there, then I'm subject to the laws of that country.
That would be Afghanistan.
Okay.
So why was he sent to Guantanamo Bay
because then? Americans are the gods, or at least used to be.
Yes.
They took the people where they wanted to. And let's not forget, and we'll come to that point as well, We Canadians repatriated our citizens to other countries to be tortured as well. So I'm not trying to change the topic. It happens, right? So Americans were fighting their war. Canadians were assisting Americans with Americans' war in Afghanistan. There's a Canadian child there whose father has taken his family there. This is a child, which is a fact. Nobody's arguing with his age.
But he did kill a Canadian soldier, right?
American.
He killed an American soldier.
Which is exactly why he was
killed an
taken to
American
Guantanamo
soldier.
Bay, because he was on the battlefield. That's why. And before we get into the Charter of Rights, which you had brought up, in the very first section of the Charter of Rights, it discusses reasonable limitations. And when you leave the country and you go join forces with the most wanted terrorist in the planet, I'm sorry, you have foregone and exceeded those reasonable limitations. That's why it's there.
That's your point of view.
No, that is in the Charter of Rights.
The Supreme Court of Canada did not recognize that point of view. The conservative Crown lawyers did argue that point of view, which is a valid argument, exactly. And Charter of Rights and Freedoms are not applicable in another country, which has its own set of rules. So whoever goes anywhere else, as you said, South Africa.
I would like to intervene here. He is a 15-year-old child, well aware. 15-year-old is a well-aware child. And all 15 years old, you go to high schools, they're very well aware. This is right, this is wrong. Killing is, once we are born, we're 3 to 4 years old, we are told this is right and wrong. Killing is a bad thing. So wouldn't he know that killing is a bad thing?
And if I can interject, killing is one of the most basic principles of morality and the standard of a liberal democracy. If you want to participate and be part of a liberal democracy, you understand that from a very, very young age. And you understand that often before you even know what death is.
So how would you defend human rights
just
here?
I have to clarify, the liberal democracy he means is a small L liberal, because under the liberal government we don't have democracy right now.
Well, we'll agree. The Liberal Party is highly illiberal.
You agree at least on something.
No question. Of course.
Okay, so whether or not Omar Khadr killed somebody, that distinction or that argument finished when Omar Khadr pled guilty to killing somebody, right? And when he pled guilty, he was an adult. So I would not argue whether or not. However, after he appealed that conviction, he brought up another argument, whereas his lawyers kept very specifically commenting that he did not kill the American medic. He never himself said, I did not kill a person. He said, I'm not quoting, I'm paraphrasing. What he meant was, I don't recall killing a person, and I hope I did not kill a person. But he never categorically denied that he killed a person. His lawyers did.
He's also never apologized for it either.
Well, that goes to, when it comes to apologizing, when we have a prime minister, Mr. Justin Trudeau, who one of his official duties is
Listen, I'm not going to be defending Justin Trudeau here, so don't worry.
No. Nobody can defend, including himself. Justin Trudeau can't defend himself.
So my question is, when he pleaded guilty that he has killed an American soldier, what was the reason behind asking for damages? Okay. And why 10.5 million?
Absolutely. Well, we don't know why 10.5 million. However, he sued the government of Canada for the violation of his charter rights. He won, and the government response was that we may have ended up paying him much more, therefore we made a settlement deal, compensation deal with him. His suit was, my charter of rights were infringed by Canadians in Gitmo when they interrogated me as a child. And Supreme Court of Canada agreed with that.
What do you think, Benjamin? When
Oh, I
he
think a
pleaded
lot.
guilty, why would he ask for damages?
Because his pleading guilty has nothing to do with the violation of his Charter of Rights. I mean, if
The
I
last
if,
I
he
checked, I was
cake.
Benjamin.
He ate the cake and he got it too, right? That kind of a thing.
No. His $10.5 million that he got was, everybody knows on Parliament Hill, that the Khadr incident occurred when Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin were in power, okay? And everybody knows that the Liberals, you know, it's funny how they become fiscal conservatives when it's convenient for them. That becomes their excuse. All of a sudden, now we're fiscal conservatives. Everybody knows that on Parliament Hill, that Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin didn't want to take the stand. They don't want to be called into court. So it was a backroom deal, something along the lines of, Justin, make it go away, pay him whatever needs to be paid, we need to move on, I don't want to be dragged into court for this. This was a decision within the party by party strategists. It was damage control, which has blown up in their face.
So what kind of role conservatives play in this deal?
What can conservatives do? Listen, you know, we tried with our flaws, and we're not perfect, nobody is. But we tried to warn people before the election. But Canadians voted for this. This is the circus that everybody asked for. Well, now you got a circus. And it's one catastrophe after another. It's one scandal after another. We have a Minister of Finance who has no idea, A, what businesses he owns, and if the budget is going to be balanced in 2019. So this is the incompetence that we have. It's our fault. It's our fault for voting for this.
So now I want to focus on the doling out of 10.5 million, which is a big, huge amount. So Canadian Taxpayers, Canadian Taxpayers Federation, they raised their voice on this, and I believe all of us are raising our voice. Why from our pockets? Why a convicted terrorist was doled out money from the pockets of citizens?
This is where liberal democracy comes in. We lined up and voted for a party to govern us. The same party who was convicted, the Liberal Party of Quebec, was convicted of criminality in the sponsorship scandal. People of Canada lined up, gave them another government. Okay? They sent us to Afghanistan, we lost our soldiers. These are the same people who are literally abusing the veterans who have lost their limbs in Canada, in Afghanistan. We line up, we vote for them again, and we'll continue doing that. Unfortunately, unless and until the people of Canada realize that you don't have to, it's not a ping pong table that you can just play like this. It's not about two conservative parties. The people of Canada are progressive people. Unless and until they vote themselves in and stop electing Bill Manos and Justin Trudeau's, the Richie Rich of Canada, who are we to argue that $10.5 million was too big?
Why didn't Justin Trudeau give it from his pocket?
Well, Justin Trudeau legally cannot give it to his pocket. He cannot even afford to have a private vacation. He has to get Aga Khan to invite him, right, in his private chopper.
That was meant in sarcasm, of course.
But I'm not sarcastic. I'm telling you the truth. He cannot afford it. That's why he gets foreign dignitaries to invite him with how many people went with him? It was a full plane.
So what do you think about why the 10.5 million came out from our pockets, Benjamin?
I would love to know. And you know what I'd love to know? Where's the money now? Because if you remember, this was leaked. And once it was leaked, because he had lost a suit in the United States where he owes the Spear family $134 million, I think is what it is. Once it was leaked, then all of a sudden the Liberal Party stepped on the gas to try to move the money as quickly as possible so American authorities couldn't seize it. That's the type of corruption that makes a winner, right? Like that's what we're dealing with. But I want to know, where's the money now?
Isn't it with Omar Khadr?
We have no idea where it is because remember, they made the transfer as quickly as possible, and who knows what country that this money is in right now. We know it's not here, and we know it's not in the United States.
Well, the settlement agreement must have a big clause of confidentiality there. The media or the people would not know about.
And the lawyer who set it up, who made $5 million on it, that's who I want to talk to. Because that's the motivating person behind it that caused all of this catastrophe, right?
At this time, I feel,
So
finish your thoughts, please.
thank you. What I want to say, it's not only $10.5 million, right? Maher Arar, once again, a Muslim
to that,
Arab gentleman sent by liberals to Syria to be tortured.
But the thing is, we cannot draw parallels between Maher Arar and Umar Khadr, a convicted terrorist.
Precedence
Umar
is very
Khadr
important
was
in a legal suit.
Citizen
But that's not
visiting his
precedence.
country. Can we draw parallels?
Absolutely. Who made their mistake? Canadian government under the liberals. Who paid him off? Canadian government under the liberals.
But these are very general terms. You can't conflate these two circumstances because they're entirely different.
Well,
right?
this
They're
Maher
entirely
Arar's, absolutely agreed. Facts are very different. Maher Arar's compensation was used as a supportive precedence in the Khadr suit. So all I'm trying to tell you, it's not new, and it won't stop here. You're talking about $10.5 million? We have another 3 gentlemen, once again Arabs and Muslims. Once again, I call them persecuted by the liberals. Once again, liberals paying them off with our money. How much is that? I believe I have
And
it here.
why are they asking these 3 people in line now?
Because
Why are
they
asking
were
money from the
repatriated and tortured, once again by Canadian authorities under the liberal
I
government.
I don't understand how were they tortured by their countries under the
Because we send
under
them,
the directs of the liberals.
We send them to be tortured. We were complicit in allowing the Arab states to torture these Canadians, just like Maher Arar.
I think more importantly, to kind of get back to the topic here, is the $10.5 million is so egregious because you know what his reward was? He was repatriated to Canada. He didn't deserve it. He really didn't deserve it. But he was given it anyways, begrudgingly. And yet the man comes back and says, I just want to get on with my life. I want to get out of the media spotlight. I don't want everybody to bother me. I just want to have my own life. And then he decides, well, maybe I'll go sue the government now. That is not somebody who wants to get on with their life. That is somebody who has nothing but contempt and smugness for our government, nothing but this utter distaste for our government, which we know is what he was taught by his father. So it seems to run in the family, right? We see that in his sister, Zainab.
So his father was a pronounced terrorist?
No, he was fully
he was a soldier,
jihadist,
Afghan soldier, or?
Well, he had a lot of jihadist ties.
Jihadist soldier.
That's right. He was very close with the bin Laden family, not the good part of the bin Laden family. We're talking about the bad part of the bin Laden family. The daughter has been very vocal on how the United States deserved 9/11. You know, my brother was supposed to be in that building the following week, and his meeting was actually canceled and pushed back. So you know what? It's really disgusting. What has happened, and that we're playing, kabuki theater with what really went on. It's $10.5 million. It's not. Here's the reason. Well, it's a fiscal conservative decision, and you know what? We can see that it's all dishonest. And what's most frustrating is that money is not Justin Trudeau's money. It's our money. It's your money.
Yeah.
When you see your paycheck at the end of every 2 weeks, those few $100s or more that are removed, that's been given to Omar Khadr, and that's the part that is most disgusting.
That is unfair. Like, I feel unfair, you feel unfair, you're feeling unfair. And
So,
I would like to continue to the talk. We have to take a quick break. Thank you very much for listening to this very heated debate on the doling out of $10.5 million to Omar Khadr. We'll take a quick break and come back. Stay tuned.
इकबाल हलाल फूड्स हलाल और एशियन ग्रॉसरी में ओंटारियो का सबसे बड़ा ग्रॉसरी स्टोर। हलाल मीट, ताज़ा सब्जियां, फलों और ग्रॉसरी की हर ज़रूरत के लिए इकबाल हलाल फूड्स का नाम याद रखें। 2 थॉर्नक्लिफ पार्क ड्राइव, टोरंटो।
Greenish Natural Health offers a balanced formulation fulfilling all of the daily requirements for essential nutrients like vitamins and minerals. Greenish multivitamin and supplements are certified vegetarian, halal, and kosher. Ask for Greenish products at your nearest pharmacy.
If you need to protect your family and business with a life and health insurance, save for your retirement and children's education, or need a mortgage advice, we can help. To set up your complimentary meeting, call us at 905-624-0008 or visit orujfinancial.com.
मिसागा में आपका टेस्ट, ताज़ा टेस्ट, हाईवे 10 और डंडास पर। हमारी स्पेशलिटी पाया, हलीम, निहारी, चिकन छोले और कबाब रोल के लिए ज़रूर तशरीफ़ लाएं।
Welcome back to Power Dilemma here with Sarah Bokhari at TAG TV. Folks, we are having a very interesting and heated debate with my very good friend Mr. Ali Naqvi and Benjamin Ditcher. So continuing our talk, my question to my panelists, my worthy panelists, is that let's focus on how our soldiers who have been in Afghanistan, American soldiers who have been in Afghanistan and have been fighting for democracy and equality and gender rights, how are they going to feel that convicted terrorist was doled out 10.5 million? What about the widows of or the widow of the soldier who was killed by Omar Khadr? And what about veterans? Why aren't they given chunks of money from the government? So over to maybe Benjamin.
In my experience with the many people that I've spoken to, they're absolutely disgusted, but they're not sure. Are they disgusted more by this illegal funneling of money, or are they disgusted by a prime minister or somebody who's occupying the prime minister's office who talks about a post-national Canada? Despite the hundreds of thousands of people who have given their lives for this country since its inception, I don't know who this guy is who thinks over the 4 years that he occupies this office that all of a sudden he is Canada and he gets to decide what is Canadian identity, which is ironic because he's obsessive compulsive about identity politics, but yet Canada doesn't have an identity, but somehow France does. I want to know how that works.
What do you think, Mr. Naqvi? How is our Canadian...
Well, the gentleman he's referring to, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, also like the limited dictatorship in China. So this is the answer to the concern of my good friend. This is what we are working towards, moving on.
I didn't understand that.
You didn't understand that.
No.
So this is a gentleman who is on record saying that he's impressed with the Chinese dictatorship.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, no, fair enough. Yeah, obviously, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
and Fidel Castro, somebody
well,
who murdered gays and murdered political dissidents and whatnot. He is an amazing individual.
Well, Fidel Castro was an uncle just like Aga Khan, right? So there it goes. And talking about family, Benjamin mentioned his knowledge and information about the Khadr family, which I'm not privy to, so I cannot comment. However, I remember distinctively watching Liberal Prime Minister of Canada, Jean Chrétien, visiting Mr. Omar Khadr's injured father in a Pakistani hospital. When Mr. Chrétien visited Pakistan in his days of as a Prime Minister. And once again I'm rephrasing, a quote I read that at that time, Mr. Chrétien, who, by the way, we recently found out was a lawyer representing clients in the leaked Paradise Papers. Mr. Chrétien, in his days, prime ministerial days, when he was visiting Mr. Khadr Sr. In the hospital, made a comment to one of the boys, Khadr boys, that in Canada you could be whatever you want to be. So, to answer to Benjamin's question, we have to be disgusted with the government. We have to be disgusted with the Liberal Party's government. We have to, and to answer your question about Supreme Court and what's the next step.
No, I'm going to ask.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Forces first.
How do people of Canada react to this, right? This is a Supreme Court decision. There will be many more like this, by the way, on similar situations. There is something called the court of public opinion, and we get to vote the Liberal Party of Canada's government out in 2019. But if you switch one conservative government with the other, if you change red to blue or blue to red, it doesn't really make a difference. Conservatism, may it be by Justin Trudeau or Mr. Harper or Mr. Scheer or whoever, or Donald Trump, can only be replaced.
You cannot.
By-
You cannot draw parallels.
You're talking about
Donald
American.
Trump and Andrew
Well,
Scheer.
he's
And why
drawing
not?
parallels
No, no, no.
between he's drawing parallels between Justin Trudeau and Andrew Scheer. So like,
Absolutely.
I don't know how that
Absolutely.
works. You have a neo-progressive and a conservative, yet somehow they're the same. That makes no
there is
sense
no.
whatsoever.
Okay. By the way,
don't know.
I don't believe. I don't believe in progressive conservatism. It's an oxymoron, just like in Ontario.
I would
DPPC
disagree
Ontario.
with
I'm
that.
sure you will. But the question is,
Assertions
these people.
without evidence will
Okay.
be
Anti-terror
ignored
law.
without evidence.
Anti-terror law. Bill C-51. Okay. Brought in by the conservatives, supported by the liberals. When it comes to voting on human rights issues in United Nations, we follow the lead of the conservative government. How many examples do you want to have about the LibCon Alliance of Canada?
But then we have to define what is terrorism. What is terrorism then?
The terrorism
What-
is.
how can you draw a line between terrorism and human rights?
Okay, so Peter MacKay.
How would you define terrorism? Your
Peter
definition.
MacKay, Justice Minister of Canada, made a statement when there was a terrorist scare in Nova Scotia. He was asked why these people were not charged with terrorism. And his response was, and it's on record, and that as a justice minister, he said, because we determined that their actions were not based on religious or their actions were not religiously or culturally based. So that's your definition of terrorism.
What is your definition of terrorism? Because it's important to point out here, we have to distinguish between terrorism-based violence or mental health disease-oriented violence.
Okay, well,
And then connecting it to Omar Khadr.
I think we need a rule moving forward for progressives, which is we don't get to arbitrarily define words for our own benefit. Words have meanings for a purpose. And what terrorism is violence in the act of pursuing ideology or political motivation. That's what terrorism is.
Yes.
Simple.
Yes.
Right?
And I agree.
Okay.
So America,
it has to
what
have a
was
motive.
America doing in Iraq?
That's
Is
a
that-
total different.
No, that's
different.
that's state terrorism.
That's
based
what
on definition
that's
of
called
Benjamin.
what that's called is a red herring. That's not what we're talking about. So let's get back
Yeah.
to
Okay,
what we're
I really
discussing.
don't understand.
A red herring means you're trying to obfuscate the
Yeah.
debate and going in a different
We're
direction.
going to talk
Absolutely
about
not.
Iraq
We're
and U.S.
talking-
later, but
That's right.
I wanted to understand, and I want our viewers to know, how do you define terrorism? How it is different than a person who gets up a gun and kills people in the U.S., or a person who has been trained and brainwashed through a certain ideology and then kills, for example, guards in Parliament Hill, Ontario.
That's exactly it.
Ottawa.
For example, the extremists on the left who are losing their heads about Las Vegas and saying, patriarchy, white supremacy, all that sort of nonsense.
Why are we talking about America?
That is something that I'm giving you an example. That's why.
Okay.
That is something that is not terrorism because it wasn't motivated by ideology or politics.
How do you know that?
There's no evidence for it. So on the conservative side, we look for
But
evidence.
wouldn't
You look
agree,
for
Mr.
evidence.
Naqvi?
And in fact, he was a Democrat. He was a registered Democrat.
And he was an
So
American. For me, the
No, the
debate
person
ends
who
there.
killed the people in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
was he motivated by some cultural or religious ideology?
I'm going to ask
I
you
have no
Brendan,
idea.
you say
No.
yes.
I have no idea. That's
No,
what I'm trying to
because-
say. You cannot say because we don't have evidence, that's why he was not a terrorist.
No, that's exactly what you do.
Terrorism is he terrorized people.
No,
People
but
died.
there has to be a reason.
But that's not what
We
terrorism
don't
is.
know. He was killed or he killed himself.
There has to be,
This is-
if
this
you
is-
pick up scholarship.
Okay, so what we are saying is-
if you pick up scholarship, the way it is defined is terrorism from the day of French Revolution is defined as a motive where you create terror among the people, and behind it there is an ideological reason connected to religion, culture, or a combined group of people. Their combined reason behind it. So why would you say that that person was a terrorist?
Because he was terrorizing people. He was killing people indiscriminately. We don't know
That's
what
not
was
what
the motive.
terrorism means. Oh,
It
this is
doesn't
the
matter
one-
what you think terrorism
No,
is.
it's
If
not
you
my
write-
personal definition.
no.
It's the
Because-
definition of the word.
Yeah,
It's called
yeah.
English. You open up a dictionary, you can read it. You'll see it right there.
Well,
We
if
don't
you are
have it-
challenging my reading abilities, I take it. English is not my first language.
Let's not
But
veer
listen,
off into
listen.
victimization culture now, right?
Okay, no. Victims. This is what I was trying to get. Some people, somebody killing somebody, people being killed, their family being victim,
Is
people
not
being
on its own
injured.
terrorism.
That is not on its own terrorism. Then you have state-sponsored terrorism, where Americans put in their soldiers on the ground and kill people indiscriminately. That is not terrorism. So what is terrorism?
Okay, getting back to Omar Khadr now. We're going to do an entire show on U.S. invasion in Iraq, so connecting it to, again, Omar Khadr, and, my mind again goes to he was trained in a certain ideology to kill people from the West who are talking about democracy, who are talking about gender equality, who are talking about free elections, to say. So why isn't he called a terrorist?
How many of these objectives were actually reached in Afghanistan?
I don't
Are
think that's what
women-
the question was.
Are women, well, this is what my answer is.
Okay.
Are women equal citizens of Afghanistan today? Was America there to indoctrinate them with the liberal democracy, going to your definition of ideology-based terrorism? Is there education there? Are there free elections?
None.
Absolutely. So this is what I'm trying to say. If we are talking about what terrorism is, let's not leave and
This is preposterous.
thank you very much.
I'd like to draw a map around this, but I need Google Map and the entire planet to figure out how you're getting back to the original point. Let's go back
she
to the
asked
original
you about
point.
the veterans in America. You were not able to answer because you did
No,
not
she
have
asked
the
me
answer.
about- she asked me about
She
veterans,
talked about
and I told
veterans.
her-
She talked about veterans. She talked about
Okay, how about you
widows.
complete your thought? Yeah.
So my thought is, if you're talking about terrorism, there are levels of terrorism. There are different kinds of terrorism. Okay, terrorizing people either with guns and ammunitions or propaganda. Terrorism is a terrorism, right? If people die,
Okay.
we are not talking about A shooting B. We are talking about A shooting A to Z.
So
Indiscriminately. Why is
Benjamin,
not
you wanna-
terrorism?
I just want to clue in
Jump
again.
in, yes.
Once again, propaganda is not terrorism. That's why there's two different words. One is propaganda, one is terrorism. They have two different words with two different meanings.
You can terrorize people with propaganda.
But
You
no,
can
but
scare people.
terrorism.
Well,
terrorism.
you don't
Terrorism
really know.
doesn't mean scaring people in this context. In the context of politics,
So
it's
what-
very specific what terrorism means.
terrorism is
and if
not-
we can't
not
agree on the
political.
definition of words,
No, terrorism is political.
Terrorism is not political. Terrorism is not political. That's
Good
what I'm
news
trying
to
to
me.
say.
Yeah,
Terrorism is not political.
Okay, this is what you believe.
Absolutely. Terrorism
I
has
would
nothing
like to
to do with
respectfully
politics.
disagree with it.
Please do. And this is the difference between
Because a person who is just shooting out people maybe he has some hallucinations, or he's not happy with
That-
his
the-
wife, or he's not happy with paying bills, he's just shooting. He's not a terrorist because he's not working through a religious cultural ideology. There is no motivating factor. What do you have to say?
How do you
Benjamin?
know that?
What I was going to say is the real problem in the world with respect to this issue is not the lone individual who goes and blows himself up because he has been poisoned by a toxic ideology or interpretation of an ideology. That's not the problem. The problem is those who promulgate those views, who teach those views, who are not violent in themselves, but that they teach violence to their communities. That is the real terrorism, and it's referred to not as terrorism on its own, but that's cultural terrorism. And that is what breeds these extremists to go out and do egregious things, right? And that in itself, that is more dangerous in itself. But I think all of these things are, in terms of the geopolitical definition of what terrorism is brought on by ideology or political motivations. Simple.
Yeah. Let me take the
Not
very
political motivation, ideology, yes,
think
just
we're
like
Tell that to the
Americans went to
IRA.
Afghanistan.
What was the IRA?
What was the IRA?
The IRA.
They had ideological and religious motivation.
Okay. Was it a political movement?
Well, Sinn Féin is a political movement,
Was
not
the
IRA.
IRA? It wasn't a political movement?
I believe not.
Okay, I don't care about belief. I go on evidence. I don't go on people's belief systems.
I say it was not a political movement. Did IRA ever contested elections?
Okay.
It
but
did not.
Again,
Let me take the heated debate. We're having a very interesting debate, folks. Let me take it to a conciliation point between my two very worthy, very, very well-informed panelists. Is now that it's a precedent has been set, and we've seen a person who was a trained soldier, child soldier, yes, was doled out 10.5 million. And then we have 3 more people in line.
3 people who have already settled, and we don't know the exact amount. They have sued 50 million each.
So isn't it?
And then another gentleman has announced that he's going to sue another 50 million for another 50 million. Yes, and this is...
Aren't we encouraging citizens to sue the government, get the money? That's my question.
We are encouraging people to remember when the Liberal government infringed upon our rights, especially looking at the presidents. Most of these are new Canadians, most of these are immigrants, most of these are Arabs, most of these are Muslims, most of these line up and vote for Liberals. Thank you very much. So we are creating a precedent, yes. This is a government who's doling out, as you say, money to people, who spent $110,000 fighting in the court of law against a real Canadian Aboriginal child who was fighting to get $6,000 for her root canal.
Yeah.
This is a government where Human Rights Commission of Canada made a finding that we have been, as Canadians, as the government of Canada, violating the rights of Aboriginal children, took them to the federal court and is spending hundreds and thousands and millions will be spending.
The
and on
convenient
the other
fiscal
hand,
conservatives.
exactly,
Like
they are learning from the best.
But
you know?
I do have a question with regards to Omar Khadr. What would the NDP have done differently? And that's not sarcasm. I'm just legitimately asking, what would the NDP
Well,
have done
you
differently?
have to ask the NDP representative for that. I'm not here as an NDP representative,
Okay,
and
but
we don't.
in your best guess, your estimation.
We would have not let this happen in the first place.
Okay,
because
But it happened. So the
Well,
ruling
if-
comes out for the Supreme Court. What
yeah.
would,
So
what
are
would the
you
NDP
saying
have done?
if is the hypothetical question is if Jagmeet Singh was the Prime Minister of Canada, the NDP Prime Minister of Canada, when this ruling came out from the Supreme Court?
Whether it was
this is a very wishful hypothesis, by the way.
Whether Thomas Mulcair, Jagmeet Singh, it doesn't matter. My point is, what would the NDP have done? We know in the court ruling there was no mention of money or of value to money. His reward was being repatriated. So my question is,
yes.
what would
I cannot answer on behalf of Jagmeet Singh, but
Okay, but
let
you
me
can speculate.
I don't speculate ever.
Well, you talked about belief systems before, and not
Belief
having
is
evidence.
different.
So
Belief is speculation is different. Belief is something that
I
I believe
understand
into.
it's different. I'm
Thank you very much. Your English is much better than mine. I agree. So let me answer the question. Both Thomas Mulcair, the former leader, and Jagmeet Singh are lawyers. Unlike Justin Trudeau, I'm not so sure about Mr. Scheer. Nobody is. I don't think he's a lawyer.
Yeah, Speaker of the House, I would think he's pretty.
But he's not a lawyer. So whatever decision they would have taken in this regard would have been based upon their legal knowledge and their commitment to Canada and commitment to their progressive ideology and human rights. That is all I can say, and that's not a speculation.
Okay, but that's a lot of buzzwords. I'm just saying.
No.
You know,
This is the
person to
problem
person,
for
conservative to
conservatives and
NDP.
liberals, progressive and liberals. This is the problem. When you talk about human rights, when you talk about fighting for human rights, when you talk about how dare Mr. Trudeau supports the conservative Bill C-51, the anti-terror, anti-Muslim law, these are buzzwords. These are not buzzwords. This is real dollars going to real human beings who have been really victimized by the real liberal government. These are not buzzwords.
What's the anti-Muslim law we have?
Anti-terror law, which was called by Amnesty International, that this is a...
We're going to talk about that later.
It doesn't
I think they said Majid Nawaz was a
It
terrorist
doesn't
as well or
matter
something.
because it's about somebody else, so that's fine.
So I believe it's a never-ending debate. We're having a very heated debate here at my show, Power Dilemmas, at TAG TV. We are unable to come to a conclusion on the definition of terrorism, and I believe this debate will go on and on till we meet again. Thank you very much for joining here at Power Dilemmas. Ciao.
#1 multicultural channel. This is TAG TV.